if I'm juggling too many things at once, like I said, there can be cross pollination. Sometimes, it's almost like your ideas are like crossing over into other projects because you're doing like three things at once. And yeah, like I don't know, I can't like necessarily like switch gears so effortlessly. I feel like there's a certain degree that I can and I do, but like yeah, I really look at like when I look in hindsight, like let's look at what you actually did while you were in those circumstances, whether it be crazy freelance or more predictable. And it's like almost always the best work I make is because I was in like a very comfortable environment, and it was just ideal working circumstances for me. Like it let my brain focus on one thing and not 50 things. Some people prefer it the other way. Some people love to be like more nomadic, and I'm going to jump from this to this, and it's just not my preference, but I'll do it if I need to.
Your guest for today's episode of the Learn Squared podcast is the brilliant Robbie Trevino. Robbie has worked with some of the biggest studios and platforms around. He's also known for his distinct and visceral work that is not only a sight to behold, but a great case study in how to use design, form, and colour in creative ways. In fact, Robbie is probably a great case study overall as to someone who to look up to, or even adopt some of the techniques he used to get himself hired, thrive in the industry, and plan for what's ahead. Let's go. Everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast. I'm delighted to welcome on the amazingly talented Robbie Trevino. Welcome, Robbie.
Thank you for having me, Aaron.
So excited to have you on, and looking forward to just chatting about everything. But yeah, traditionally, as we do with all these episodes, if you wouldn't mind just letting the guests know a quick rundown as to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so Robbie Trevino, concept artist, illustrator, human artist, based in Los Angeles, California, originally from Detroit. If you know the States, if you know the United States, that's like the Midwest, kind of where the Industrial Revolution stuff happened with all the cars. Definitely come from like the blue collar Midwestern, machine assembly line working sort of like roots. And yeah, I let's see, I got started in tabletop RPGs. That's Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, that sort of thing, and then slowly moved into AAA games. And that was, I think it's been 13 years now of sort of vacillating between, these days it's AAA and film stuff, but mostly AAA game development. And yeah, I mean, there's some mobile games in there too. There's some random, lots of all. We can cover it all. I've done a lot of stuff, but it's been 13 years of being mostly a concept artist and illustrator.
Cool. Is that like 13 years when you started working, or was that when your like journey began of like, hey, I want to do this thing? And does that include like your education and training for it as well?
No, I graduated from art school 2012, and then like literally that summer, not even, well, yeah, I feel like maybe like into the fall, between summer and fall, like after graduating, got a job with Wizards of the Coast doing the Magic the Gathering cards. And actually, it's funny. I feel I should show this because I dug it up just for this podcast, but I have the original analog portfolio that I used, that I printed, went and networked with at like conventions locally and like out of state. And, this is stuff. When I graduated art school, I was like, I'm going to be an illustrator. I wasn't really the AAA games, like maybe, but like concept art wasn't really a thing, not a curriculum, let's say, like something you go to like art center for like entertainment design or something. It's like I went to the College for Creative Studies, and their primary specialty was industrial design, automotive design, because it's the Motor City, it's Detroit. They've got all those connections with GM, Chrysler, Ford, all the big three automotive companies. But I graduated, right. This is senior thesis work, right? Like this is what I like left school with, right? It was a lot of like fantastical. Yeah, I'll just keep going through them, right? Like a lot of this stuff, right? Uh, and then we start to get into like fantasy type stuff, right? Like that's clearly like a Dungeons and Dragons orc, right? And I was really gunning for Wizards of the Coast, right?
Oh,
I was, and like yeah, it's crazy to look at this stuff and be like, it's 13 years old, but where I really like caught their attention, right, is I basically made fake Magic the Gathering cards. And this is something
Okay.
that a few friends of mine were kind of like brainstorming on and being like, how do we show our art in context, like as we're
Hmm.
graduating? So I basically was like, well, I'm gonna like literally hit, the potential employer over the head with, here, like this could be us, but like in the
Hmm.
form of, their product with my art. And yeah, they loved it. They were like, "Yeah, we'd like to hire you as an illustrator, but also we want to buy the publishing rights to these images." And I was
Oh,
like,
cool.
I didn't know that was even a thing that could happen. And maybe that's still the case now. I don't know. This was 2012, so it was a long time ago. But yeah, I thought they were just going to be like, "Get out of here with your stupid art, you idiot!" But instead, they were like, "Yeah, looks great. Like this is what we want. This is what we need. Like you're in, man." And yeah, that was sort of the genesis of like the career. It was
Wow.
like tabletop RPGs for art, tabletop RPG art for like 2 years,
Hmm.
and then AAA games kind of after that. But yeah, that was sort of my start, like leaving Michigan. I think the neighboring state of Indiana, I drove to a convention with this portfolio called Gen Con, and that was sort of like my first time ever like leaving home and networking and meeting other professionals, and it went well. I was prepared. So
Oh, that's incredible, and it looks stunning. I mean, the fact that it's like, well, I think anything that's well designed and well created, like it doesn't matter how long ago it was made, like it will always age well.
yeah.
I find, and that looks incredible. Um, and so like, I'd love to know about your portfolio creation process. I know exactly what it's like to have an analog portfolio. I graduated in 2010, and
Hmm.
it was just like I did industrial design and transport design. So a lot of the
Oh,
stuff
okay.
we were told to do was like A3, like the basically double the size that you had. So I had to carry all that kind of stuff around, and
Hmm.
I never curated and also created a portfolio that I even enjoyed or was proud of, let alone to represent me as an artist. So I always like struggled with that, and I'd love to know about and I think a lot of guests as well, is particularly like, what was that adventure like trying to curate that portfolio? Because it sounds like there's a lot of like strategy involved, being deliberate, and obviously just showcasing yourself. So I guess like the first question to ask regarding that, like, did you find building a portfolio natural and easy, or was it a struggle?
I got to think back because like this was 13 years ago, but I would say
Right.
probably the biggest struggle for me is like I went to school for automotive design initially, and I
Wow.
talk about this
Same.
so
Yeah.
many times whenever I'm like asked about my past and give a presentation or anything. Is like, yeah, I basically was like, I want to do cars. I want to like I grew up with all these like printed posters of like Lamborghinis and Dodge Vipers and like American muscle
Yes.
cars. Like I grew up around that stuff and I loved it and I still love it. I'm still a car guy, especially living in Los Angeles. But like
Hmm.
I I was like, I'm gonna draw stuff like that because in my brain, as like a 20-year-old man, I was like, yeah, that's how that works, right? You just like
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
and make the next Lamborghini. And of course, right, like reality versus expectation. I started actually doing the industrial design stuff, and I picked up a lot of really good like hard surface design, fundamentals. But like all the feedback was like your ideas are too ambitious. Like, what are you,
Mm.
Sid Mead? Like, what is this? Like, this is like none of this is real or could be real in this lifetime. And I just decided to pivot. And like that was the hardest part in school. It wasn't so much making the portfolio, it was like making the change from industrial design, automotive guy to like there isn't really concept art yet, right? But like I mean, it exists, but not in my school as like something you could like learn. But there was
Yeah.
illustration, there was fine art, and when I started talking to like those departments is when I know I've got quite a few books to choose from, but I think, do I have it? Please tell me I have it. I can't find it. Oh, that's too bad. Okay, let's just say I'm holding a Sid Mead book in my hand, right? That is that is what they showed me initially is hey, like maybe there's like a crossover like, path and like an inspiration that could sort of directly relate between like illustration stuff and like your transportation, education and like Sid Mead I think was like the perfect like
Mm.
ambassador, like bridge of those two interests. And yeah, that's when I started like considering, right, seeing like world building, right, like the art books of like Brahm and Geiger and Vikshinsky and Sid Mead and all these, all these world building geniuses like James Gurney, Dinotopia, all that stuff. Wayne Barlow, I was like, oh, like there are people that build worlds behind the things we consume, right? I just, growing up in Michigan, you only, like most people, right, on the outside of this stuff, you just consume the product, but you don't really look into like how it's made. And that information certainly wasn't available like it is today because social media and the internet and what it is now. But like, yeah, I think I saw like a potential path forward, and I kind of Frankensteined like a
Yeah.
curriculum together of like, well, there's Gnomon DVDs, and like I guess there's like CG Hub and the DeviantArt and like things I can look at. I remember seeing like all the old, whoever was big back then. I'm trying to like name drop specific people like Dan Levisi. I remember like seeing
Hmm.
his work for the first time and being like, whoa, you can like digitally paint stuff and it looks like that, like
Yeah.
realistic and like textured, and like, yeah, there's a lot of things that Brad Rigney, like all that, Dave Raposa's like Ninja Turtles, the fan art stuff. Like I started, it definitely was slanted a lot towards illustration, but there was concept art influences in there. So I kind of decided, well, illustration is probably going to be for me, and that's where I like really specifically targeted the clients that I knew would hire you for illustration,
Hmm.
and sort of like, there was this word on the street rumor of like everything is a stepping stone, which is not entirely untrue, but like the word was between students and young professionals was Wizards is like the benchmark. But before you get there, you got to go through all these other like random, RPG companies, but like if you want to be an illustrator, like Wizards is like the place to work. It's like if concept artists wanted to work at Massive Black back in the day. It was like that. It was
Hmm.
like this is the like utopia and like the end goal. But I was like, no, I'm just gonna target them directly because like what do you mean? Why do I have to take that path? Like just be
Hmm.
match like at bare minimum match their quality bar and then like exceed it if possible. Like and that's really I just like the process like the portfolio making process was very like academic and thought out, but like it was getting, I think, getting to that point in school of like, what do you want to do? And then finally deciding on illustration that was really complex. Actually making the art was like, it's illustration, and I wasn't super fast when I started, so
Hmm.
it was time consuming, like most analog digital art can be. But like, yeah, I made a portfolio, and then I'm pretty good at networking anyway, so it wasn't like too crazy of an experience doing that. But like, yeah, the
Yeah.
portfolio wasn't as hard as you'd think. It was deciding to be an illustrator that
Right.
was way harder.
Right.
Yeah.
Ah, incredible. No, that's very enlightening and interesting to hear. Similar journey. Like 2010, I graduated and started off with automotive design. Then halfway through switched to transport design, and it was only in my third year when I discovered concept art, as in like there's a direct pathway. That was where it kind of clicked for me, and it's similar kind of thing. Because like, okay, how do I realign and reshuffle and kind of get into this thing, and kind of like it's like jumping out of a aircraft and it just like kind of like jumping into another aircraft without kind of crashing. But yeah, but it was super fascinating. Um, did you find any resistance to switching your kind of like curriculum up, or was you kind of encouraged? You still you still on the course then, right? Is that correct? Sort my light now.
Yeah, I mean, pushback definitely. People were confused. They were like, illustration, what's that? At least with the
Yeah.
initial, sort of network and friend group I had made, because everyone was in transportation, and like it's true, just looking at like the data and the math, it was like illustration, bad career bet based on like what we have to like go off of what we know gets you work versus, oh, this is the job placement rate is super high in transportation design because
Mhm.
like our school is so connected to these companies, and it's a very focused curriculum, like as focused as if you were to go to like art center or fengzu for like entertainment design. Like it'd be very like regimented and like whereas like illustration was this nebulous thing of like I kind of get it. Like maybe you could do something with it. It was almost like fine art, honestly. It was very
Mhm.
like there wasn't really a strategy for getting hired other than like just make good work. It wasn't, whereas like in transportation design, it was there was like a very clear path forward,
Yes.
and you just had to make work that like was quality was really the only requirement. Illustration was a very like you're kind of like dumb for doing this, you know that, right?
Right.
And I was
Okay.
like, yeah, but I want to try, and then I did, and it worked out. But like, yeah, everything said maybe don't do that. I would
Hmm.
say like the data and the sort of feedback I was getting, sure.
And did that ever creep into your mind, or was you adamant that no, this is the pathway I want to take?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I think about feedback now between peers and coworkers on projects or whatever, and then I think about feedback during art school, and it was so much more confusing and so much more overwhelming as a student because everyone was sort of telling you different things. And you kind of had to take it all in, and you're young and you're more impressionable, and there's a lot more stress because for me, I didn't have like I wasn't coming from a place of privilege with my career and my art school journey. It was like you're going to graduate with a lot of debt, and
Mm-hmm.
you are going to have to pay that off. So if you don't figure this
Mm-hmm.
out, like you are going to sink. So it was like a sink or swim sort of situation. And I think like that pressure with a lot of confusing, conflicting like feedback of like do this, no, do that it was all very overwhelming. So it definitely like there was a lot of times where it really confused me, and I was like maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I should. But there were
Mm-hmm.
definitely very encouraging people in that mix too, who I still know and talk to this day. It's just yeah, it was really confusing as like a young, impressionable person. Like there's a lot of feedback here, and I'm not really sure the best way to move forward. But I definitely got like a lot of encouragement too. It's just I got a lot of information at once, and I was like,
Yeah.
this is a lot.
Yeah, I guess that's also true as well. Like, I guess it was no like, and I think for a lot of people who may be in a similar boat as well, it's not like people berating you saying, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" It's more a case of almost everyone's trying to give you their best version of advice, and a lot of the time, advice, especially when it comes to career and jobs and paying off debts and all sorts, is almost err on the side of caution and play the safe route because based on obviously their experience to see like you don't want to fall in a trap where you kind of it doesn't work out. But in terms of like the gearing towards illustration and particularly on the portfolio side, um, what strategies were you taking in terms of knowing what to put in there? Or do you kind of like make a bunch of stuff and then curate afterwards?
No, what I did is I've always been very like academic and thought out with my process. It's not like an artsy like the muses will speak to me, and then I'm like throwing paint on a canvas in the woods listening to music. No, it's not like that. It's very like I'm going to do research. I'm going to I'm going to research brands, I'm going to research projects, subject matter. I'm going to build out like a big old roadmap of like how to do this thing. And I mean, reference is, I know it's like the age old saying, but it's like I use reference like for
Mm-hmm.
everything, including like how do we target a company and like what's
Mm,
like their quality bar at a minimum and like what are the products they make and what's the work culture like. I definitely did research as much as I could at the time on what was
yes.
available. Like Wizards, what are their products like who are the people that like make up that company, who are the artists that make up the roster that make the product, what is the product, like how do people experience it, like and I'm not, still to this day I don't play Magic the Gathering even though I've done cards for like
Mm,
13 years now, and I've done like world building sprints, and like I've done concept art and design, like world built a lot of their settings too with teams of people. It's I'm still like I can't really tell you how to play the game, and that's
right.
never been a requirement working with them. It's just can you make compelling artwork is
Mm,
really the biggest point to it. Just like if you're working concept art as like in games, let's say as a concept artist for a AAA company, you don't necessarily have to play games. It'd be helpful for your
mm-hmm.
job, but like if you're an artist and you make appealing designs and like strong competent artwork, like and so like that's sort of my thinking with every time I like was like targeting a client, like whether it
Yeah.
was in school or I'm trying to get a new job, like how do I get a new job, and like are there specific companies or specific projects like IPs or whatever that I want to work on. um
Mm.
Yeah, so I was very intentional, like and like when I did my research and found out like where the art directors would be, doing portfolio reviews in Gen Con,
Right.
and it like lined up perfectly. Where I was like, oh, this is going to be after graduation. I just need to have my portfolio ready by this date, and it was coming up pretty quick. So I was like, and I also needed to start making money as soon as possible graduating.
Mm.
But yeah, I definitely did my research, like looked into Magic as a brand, looked into like the products, like what's the quality bar, like who are the artists that are making the art. Yeah, it was very thought out. And then I got some advice from people online, whoever I could find, like even reached out. I did the scary student thing of like, I'm gonna like reach out to a professional and I have no idea if they're gonna respond. And now it's like everyone talks to everyone. But
Yeah.
back then I was like blown away at like people who would actually respond to me. And a few helpful artists were like, hey, I would say have at minimum this many pieces in your portfolio. you know, our director's got to look at like 100 portfolios a day. They don't have time to look at like all 50 of your images. So make sure the good ones are the first like 3 to 5. Like, don't
Hmm.
leave the good ones for the end that they might not even get to. Strategies like that, just
Hmm.
basic advice. Uh, yeah, no, definitely. It wasn't like I'm just gonna make fantasy art and hopefully it looks good on a magic card. I was like, no, no, no. Let's plan this out like very carefully, and it worked.
Uh,
It totally worked.
that's solid. And I'm sure a lot of people listening will obviously, because yeah, there's people are always on different stages, and even like as you get on in your career, you kind of go back to the beginning and maybe want to reinvent yourself or redo your portfolio again. And I think with anything or with a portfolio, it's the trap I fell into was more like it's about me and what decides me, and then you realize no, it's a like you said, like it's a strategic thing, and you can be more strategic about it. You can use it to like target companies or maybe clients or type kinds of work in different ways. So which kind of tips and things regarding building portfolio have stuck true with you and stuck with you throughout time? Like, do you have like a certain number of pieces you keep, or certain kind of like obviously feel free if it's the propriety stuff you don't want to reveal. But
Yeah.
like yeah, what kind of stuff have what kind of like things stick? Because obviously with advice and tips and techniques, they come and go, right? Like some age like milk, some stay eternal. What was it like for you?
Like it's so funny because you're saying the age like milk thing, and I'm thinking of I'm not gonna name the professor. I don't even remember who it was to be honest, but someone in my art school, their advice, their business practice advice to me, like when I was a student waiting to graduate, was like use bright colors on your business cards because like that will catch an art director's eye. And I was like, I would say don't do that. Like that's probably one of the milk age like milk ones where it's like, dude, what? Like anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. I got a nice mix of advice, but I think some things are still universally true. Like I don't really have a set number of pieces. I've learned I'll say my tendency is to have too much work. Like and then I usually get told by peers who I'm kind of like, "Hey, can you just give me some notes? Like here's the stuff, like whether it's NDA, under lock and key or it's like the public stuff." And almost always they're like, "That was so much stuff. Like I would just I know you're trying to show the versatility thing, but like really like narrow this down a bit." And
Hmm.
sometimes I will change a portfolio. Like if let's say I'm going to apply to 3 or 4 different jobs, not every job is going to get the same portfolio. Like I'm going to look specifically at places and it's like if the position in the listing says, the emphasis is character design, I'm not going to show them a bunch of environment art that I might have. Like I maybe 1 or 2 pieces, maybe, but even then it's like no no no, just hit them with the character design stuff. You got creatures, character, props, anything that like relates to that job in some way, like I would emphasize that stuff the most. And if you want to include anything else, maybe have it in the back because they might not even get through everything that you're showing them anyway. And so just make sure like the most relevant stuff and hopefully the most memorable stuff is like probably going to be seen first if it's going to be seen at all.
Mm.
So like have it in the front. Like things like that. And like I said, definitely the portfolio will pivot a bit. Like
Mm.
I have such an eclectic collection of art over the years that it's like it's wild. And I definitely a lot of it doesn't I would say doesn't hold up comparatively to like other more current things. And it's not that any of it's bad. It's just one big piece of advice I got from many art directors was over the years was like you're going to be remembered for your weakest pieces, not your strongest. So like if there are weak links in this chain, try to eliminate them. Like
Mm,
even if you think like, well, but I just want to appear well-rounded, it's like, yeah, but if you've got like 10 amazing character pieces and then like one really weak, maybe it's a prop or an environment or something, it's like they're probably going to they'll remember and appreciate the good stuff, but it's that one like weak link will also probably work against you, like almost always. It's kind of like
mm,
getting like a negative feedback on a social media post, right? Like, you don't remember the 200 supportive ones, you remember the one critical one, and it sticks out like,
mhm,
like nails on a chalkboard. So it's like that is probably the most universal thing that still holds true every time I make portfolio work and like
mm,
apply to jobs is yeah, you like like you're going to be remembered for your weakest stuff, not your best stuff. So like try to eliminate any weaknesses, even if you feel like I think it'd be nice to have. No, if it's not firing on all cylinders, if it's not good like or great,
mhm,
like just get it out of there. Like the nice to have stuff is so unnecessary, and I think it works against people more than they realize.
mm. I've heard that topic, not topic, that kind of like ethos and that I'd call it a technique even in many different industries. Casually, I watch like a lot of, well, not much recently, but like cooking shows. I'm into like music production and the technical side of that, and you always hear a lot of the professionals when they share their knowledge is strip back, take away, strip back, take away, strip back, take away. If you find that you don't miss it when it's gone, then it never needs to be there in the first place. And I guess it works in this case as well. But with that said, and I remember I had this dilemma as well early on, and obviously, long story short, it was more a case of the entire portfolio just wasn't there. It wasn't solid
Mm.
quality throughout. But I always struggle to be like, which is the weakest piece, which is the strong piece, and all that kind of stuff. Did you ever have that difficulty, or was it always? Did you find it easy to find out what was bringing things down?
I mean, I say I would I like yes, I think I've always had that difficulty, and like getting feedback, thankfully, from enough people that I trust, whose opinions are valid and great.
Mm-hmm.
It's like yeah, like I've had to like learn even now, like hey, it's still too much. Like trim back, like eliminate the weak links. Uh, I think I mean yeah, it's been 13 years and I still put too much stuff in my portfolio. I think that's just like a tendency of mine because I just have so much to show,
Mm-hmm.
and you did all these multifaceted thoughts go into your brain when you're trying to get work and you're just trying to get the job. So you consider everything, and I think that's what I do, and I think that's where like I start to overload things, but I still make sure to do my due diligence, and I've gotten better about pulling things back, but I will still run everything by at least a few people just to get a second
Mm-hmm.
opinion because I have my shortcomings, like, and I always will in some ways, and like I need help with those blind spots, and like because I have like a network of peers and people I trust, like I usually get really useful feedback in that way. And it's something I recommend everyone does is like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it, but like so much of your creative path and your success is like who you know and like how they help you. It's almost like it's pretty much the other half to like the art equation is like who you know and like getting your foot in the door and like how do you stay there and this and that. But yeah, it goes back to portfolio stuff too, I think, not
Mm-hmm.
just like literally who you work with, but it's like someone helping you get a job.
Final question. I'm sure it actually come up a few times throughout, but final question on the portfolio side of things. Um,
Hmm.
One of the cool things I always found, and I guess like the limitation of having a physical portfolio is maybe there's only a certain number of sleeves or there's only a certain number of pieces you have. So you can, put them in and out and you can kind of like change it around to spec. In the digital age, maybe you have a one website or what have you, and it's kind of all plunked in one place. You mentioned obviously as well that like for different companies it might like this work you send out will be a little bit tweaked for them or slightly different. Do you still do that now digitally? Like, do you send like more like a folder over or do you just send a link and like, has that changed now that everything's all online and digital now for you?
Yeah, I will do usually the link thing. Here's the thing. My primary portfolio is based around ArtStation. And I know for a while, even like the private channels, right, under like password, right, the NDA stuff that that you can't show publicly, there was a lot of like bot issues and things. And what I didn't realize is like I would send that like homepage link and then like a password and say hey like you art director HR person or I guess TA person whoever is like recruiting like just use this password and use this link and like it turns out that like no one was able to actually like look at the work. So what I did is I switched to PDFs and I like very specifically looked at the job, the company, the products they make, and like would just sort of fine tune PDFs. And the nice thing about emailing a PDF is it's all private anyway. So like
Yes.
you can include NDA stuff in it, as long as you're able to show it privately and like like that was an easy way to do things. Like it's you just custom tailor it, usually use like Google presentation or something that can be like exported effortlessly. If you curate it all, through Google online, you can link someone that way, or you can send a physical, I guess, digital PDF as well. It's the closest thing to physical now, right? But like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's all digital, but I hopefully that makes sense, the
No, no,
strategy
it does.
there.
Yeah, no, it does,
Yeah.
and I think that's a
Yeah.
good point as well to mention. Like, I remember again a uni and stuff back then. It was like make a CD, business card, all these different kind of formats and what have you. Some people went as far to like print a book and get extravagant that way. Um, but one common theme that was throughout it was like you want to make sure if you are sending files that they open. Obviously, like in this case, like there's certain things you might not know that might cause friction, which is a case of like like bots and stuff or the links not
Yeah.
working or what have you. And with recruiters, depending on how many they got to get through or how busy they are, they will just skip it. They won't go for that effort as well. So you want to kind of like have least friction. I remember like with document files, Word docs tend to be more annoying than PDFs.
Mm.
So yeah, like that's a great tip. Just find the most pain-free, least friction format and just send stuff that way. Um,
Yep.
so you meant obviously you tailored your portfolio and your work to get the attention of Magic the Gathering, and you got it. How did that feel when you got it? Like, was it like mission complete, or did you have some kind of different kind of like feeling around it?
No, I mean, yeah, it felt at the time it was mission complete. And I was, I was like, we did it. We've arrived. This is it. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
surely I'll just do this until the end of time, right? And a good piece of advice I got literally while celebrating this, I think it was on Facebook back in the day. Ah, sounds so old. From a professor who I went to school with, newly graduated. He was like, just remember, like this is just a stepping stone. And I did not appreciate what he was saying nearly as much as I should have at the time. And I do now, and it's something I preach like gospel to everyone when talking about like journeys and opportunities. It's everything is a potential stepping stone to something else and potentially something greater. It's you just have to like opportunities are opportunities, but like yeah, it's especially with how much the industries have changed and continue to change today, like way more than like it's almost unrecognizable now than when I first got into all this.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a stepping stone and we don't really necessarily know where it's all going, but you take and you don't take opportunities as they come. Everything is a path in some way. It's a stepping stone. And but at the time I was like, this is it, like forever, right? And it's like, no, I was completely wrong. But at the
Mm-hmm.
time I was like, I made it. I'm in Magic forever.
Nice. And did that intimidate you in any particular way? Like starting on your first day? Like, was it remote? Did you have to go into? I think they're a remote company, right? Or did they have studios?
Yeah, yeah. It was illustration, and that's who they. I would say. I feel like I'll just make up percentages. Of all the artists that work on Magic the Gathering and make like we'll say the product, the literal cards themselves, I'd say probably 90% of that, 95% of that is like all outsourced work. It's all
Okay.
like one-off contracts between illustrators. It's work for hire, like no royalties, no, it's not a salaried thing. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like I'm gonna do this job for you and then invoice and get paid for it, and then get another job maybe kind of thing. And like that is how those Magic the Gathering cards get commissioned. Even now it's still the case. Everything gets
Mm-hmm.
commissioned like one-off jobs. There is a team at Hasbro, well, Wizards, owned by Hasbro, who does a lot of like the world building stuff and like building out the guides, the world building guides, the sort of like art bibles that get sent out to those illustrators with creative briefs, and they reference the world guide, the package. But like I would say like its majority is outsourced work, and it's all everyone from all over the world does the cards, and then there's like a small internal team at Wizards that actually like assigns the work and does the world
Mm.
building.
And what was your? I'm sure. I guess you can reveal. If not, that's fine. What was your first gig? What was your first kind of like task?
It was a card. It was a I'm trying to think if I do have the cards, so I'd have to dig them up.
That's fine.
It was this horse. It was what was it? Theros was the setting, so this was like the Greek mythology setting. And yeah, I think it was like a multi-legged horse. It was like, I mean, it didn't have to be, but I was like, can we make it crazy? And my art director Jeremy Jarvis at the time, he was like, oh yeah, absolutely. He's the guy that hired me. He interviewed me
Okay.
at Gen Con and was like, cool stuff, and um, yeah, my first assignment was that type of work. It's interesting because he told me like he had seen all these moody, sort of like dimly lit, rim lit, dark, very artificially lit portfolio pieces, and none of them were really like in the daytime. There wasn't like that big, harsh, exposed, like open light with blue sky and clouds and all that. And before he assigned me the card, he was like, you can do like sunlit stuff, right? Like I think he was just asking that sort of casually, and it's because that whole setting is like in Greece, ancient
Mm-hmm.
Greece. It's all like Greek mythology. There's a lot of like, think like romantic,
Yes.
like fantasy paintings, lots of like big cloud forms and you know, golden fields of wheat and yeah, just think like Gladiator. Like not the dark
Mm-hmm.
scenes, but the nice well lit ones, or like 300, right? A lot of daytime
Yes.
shots.
Yes.
So yeah, it was cool. It was that kind of setting, and one of the cards I did from that setting is so old. I think it was the second card I did called the
Okay.
Gray Merchant, and it's got a really good mechanic. It's won tournaments, like it's popular with the players, and
Oh,
therefore
cool, cool, cool.
a lot of signature requests. And I look at that art and it looks so bad now because it's like 13 years old. But the card is popular because it's a good card. So
Yeah.
that's something I would say people should be prepared for. Is like if you do Magic or you want to do Magic cards, it's like yeah, your most popular, most signed, most requested card, right, might be the thing you hate artistically the most because
Yeah.
it's old or it wasn't like the best thing you've done on a card, but it's popular because the
Mm.
mechanics are good on the card. That's an interesting one.
Did you find any difficulty starting, I guess, like professional work? And were you working in any capacity, like maybe some freelance gigs or ever, doing professional work before you got hired at Magic? Or was that the first
No,
one?
it was literally I was working at a hydroponic shop, uh, selling equipment that people use to grow marijuana.
Okay.
It wasn't a shop that sells weed. It's a shop that sells like the
The tools to
literal
make to
like
grow it. Yeah.
yeah. Yes, to make a grow farm, basically. And before that, I was at a hardware store, little mom pa rinky-dink
Uh-huh.
hardware store for like 7 years because this is the Midwest, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
everyone
yeah.
there is like, oh, like you're doing the art thing, like good luck, It's no one really, yeah, like so Magic, even doing Magic cards, they still were like, what is this? Like it,
Mm.
I got hired finally at Xbox and moved to the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, and that's where people started taking me seriously back home. But like 2 years of Magic cards, people were like, you still live with your mom though. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
And it's true. It's having crushing student loan debt, and graduating, and getting paid. I don't know. I feel like I was getting paid like $800 to $1,000 every couple of months for the work I did on Magic. It's like that doesn't even pay your adult bills, like let
Mm.
alone begin to chip away at your debt. So yeah, there was a lot of financial hardship for a good 2 years freelancing before I finally got like an actual pipeline, like AAA games,
Mm.
like job, like a salaried position with benefits and stuff. Like that was life changing, and we can get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, freelance was hard, definitely in the beginning.
And how did you get yourself through it? Like, did it ever? I'm sure there's always like highs and lows, but did it ever get to the point where you thought, I need to try something different, I need to give this up, or did it almost determine you even more?
I definitely considered giving up quite a few times. I remember, the Wizard stuff started pumping and like that was cool. And then like if you remember, do you remember Applebot? That like Japanese company that did like
I remember hearing about it, but I never really checked out their
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
they had a mobile game. They had two mobile games. One was fantasy themed and one was sci-fi themed. Galaxy Saga and Legend of the Cryptids. And if you just go on Pinterest and you Google like Legends of the Cryptids, you'll see all of your favorite illustrators today were doing like art for these mobile games,
Yeah.
and the rates were astronomically better than what Wizards was paying. And so I think for about a year there, right? So this is like let's say a year after I'm into Magic the Gathering, Applebot comes along and then hires everyone, including myself, and the pay is so much better. I'm actually able to like afford rent, and I could move out on my own, and I could even save a little bit of money, not much, but like I could start to like kind of be an adult. Um, and like that was good, but then once that dried up, this was maybe like half a year into I feel like this is like 1.5 years into being an illustrator. Magic was also, like to go from some cash finally to basically peanuts again with the Magic stuff. And it's not that Magic has bad rates. It's just I wasn't able to produce artwork fast enough to make it mathematically make sense based
Mm-hmm.
on,
Mm-hmm.
cost of living, student loan debt. Like Wizards pays the best out of like I would say any like tabletop RPG company, even today by today's standards
Mm-hmm.
still. And they're a great company or great client to have. Like I'm still in contact with them. I still do work with them to this day. They're awesome. But yeah, it didn't work for what I needed at the time based on my skills and this and that. And those really dry months, I definitely was like, maybe I should like go drive like a postal truck or something, or
Mm-hmm.
like maybe I'll go back to like, I worked at Taco Bell when I was in high school, like as a 16-year-old. Maybe I could do fast food again because I would actually make just as much money or more, and even
Mm-hmm.
in a more predictable fashion, just like putting on like an apron and like flipping some burgers, like believe it or not. So, and yeah, like that was hard, because you also look at the debt and you're like, did I make the worst decision of my life? Because I'm in debt forever. Like I thought I
Yeah.
was gonna at that time was gonna die with that debt because I think about all my teachers who are like still paying off their student loans back in 2012, 2013, and they're like in their 40s and 50s, and so I'm like, I'm this now. Uh, but yeah, like the AAA thing came out of it was very surprising when it happened, and we can get to that. But yeah, definitely. Actually, wait, one more story. Whoa, the first and only book cover I ever did, book cover job. It was a Magic the Gathering artist who we became friends with because we were working on those same settings together, right? The Theros stuff. He happened to be an art director at a publisher which doesn't exist anymore, but it was a book publisher, and he hired me to do a book cover, and the
Mm-hmm.
pay was pretty good. I think it was like 1,600 or something. Like so at the time that was like, whoa, crazy. That's like two or three Magic cards. That's wild. Like,
Yeah.
and I did the work. It was cool to work with him because I admired his work, and you know, uh, we're talking. I think a lot of these jobs are like net 30, net 60 on like your invoice to getting paid, and like I was rolling up on like almost 2 months of like not hearing anything after like the job was done, and I found out through Facebook that the company had gone bankrupt and wasn't paying anyone. So I was like, oh my God, like I need that money. Like this is like,
Yeah.
how am I gonna like pay rent? How am I? I was like, I can't believe this. By the way, that company got their debts and their IP and everything, the IPs that they had, all got bought out. Like I think 3 or 4 years later, and I just got a random check in the mail one day, like where I
Oh,
was
cool.
living in Washington all those years later, and I was like, oh wow, that
Yeah.
book cover job finally paid me, but it took like 4 years to get paid. So
Yes. Yes.
there are times where circumstances that are out of your control mean you don't get work, you don't get money. Like there's a lot of moving parts here. It's not as simple as you're an artist now, you do work for a company and you get paid. Sometimes you do the work and you get paid but way later, or sometimes you never get paid. Like there's stories like that too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally. Yeah. Bringing back a lot of memories for myself and a little bit of trauma too. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
similar to yourself, like since the age of like 17, warehouse jobs, sales jobs, all that kind of stuff, retail jobs, whilst like studying or even doing art and stuff as well. And you get used to the fact that like you get a regular paycheck and it's predictable, and then you can balance
Mhm.
things around there. And then it was definitely took a while to get used to not the habit, but like just the reality of like you do something and then it's done, and then there's like a unspecified delay of when the money comes in. Bills don't care. Bills always have that kind of like set deadline and stuff, and it
Yep.
took me a few years to kind of like just get used to that chaos. I guess that's the way to describe it. Of like things are irregular, and how do you kind of manage that kind of unpredictable nature of freelance? Like, did you, because you mentioned like with the portfolio and other things as well, like you have that kind of like methodological approach to things. Like, how do you cope with the irregularity of freelance and payments and things that go well and then all of a sudden they just shut off?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned to cope in productive ways with it over the years, but initially, I mean, especially in like 2012 to 2014, before getting like a job, I was like, I just like panic attacks, like, or, anxiety attacks, like nothing like
Yes.
literally that puts you in a hospital or anything, but just a lot of like, I think I need to
Worry
go for a
and that kind
drive.
of stuff.
I think I
Yeah.
need to go for a hike. Yeah, just a lot of like emotional
Yeah.
despair and distress. Definitely.
Yes.
Nowadays it looks much more like, well, like you've applied and it's all you can do. Why don't you like sharpen the blades a little bit? Maybe like open up Blender, like do some modeling, like play around with ZBrush some more, like maybe like learn some skills
Mm-hmm.
in the meantime. Like, and but like, yes, back there was a time where it would just emotionally overwhelm me. And that also came from just, yeah, like the circumstances of having like no life savings, and the jobs were that much more unpredictable than they are now. Now it's like usually if there's a huge dry spell, if I'm not full time at a place and I am freelancing, it's almost more a matter of like you have to like say no to things now, because like there's a few things and they're sort of like not lining up, and you need to like plan this out in a way that won't burn you out into the ground. That's its own like good problem, but a problem to have as well. But in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, when it was like that might be the last job you ever get, and there's nothing on the
Mm-hmm.
horizon, that feels very,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what do? You distract yourself with other things, like life is full of other things besides art. There's ways to cope with this. Yeah, like lots of going to the gym, lots of hiking, lots of working out, lots um like I used to skateboard. Sometimes I would just find other things to do than just sitting here staring,
Yes.
refreshing the inbox. Like, has anyone
Yes.
responded? Yeah. You have to figure out ways. Like if I had been more emotionally grounded back then and more who I am now, I'd probably just learn new skills in the downtime and just
Mm.
keep applying and keep doing your due diligence.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And yeah, with time, and again, I think like for a lot of people listening, depending on where they're in their career, especially with the last couple of years, with there's a lot of people I've spoken to that have just been caught up in just the lack of, not a lack of, like the turmoil in the industry, either getting laid off or not getting any work and
Yeah.
things like that. And as with freelance, there's always like, yeah, there's, I don't know. There's moments or there's little patches, like you mentioned, like where things are kind of stable, and you think, oh, this is going to be fine. But there's always that kind of like storm cloud in the background that's always like threatening, like to come over and just wash things out, and you're always kind of preparing for that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like slowly you kind of like just realize that, like with weather, using that as an example, like you just sometimes have to ride it out and just weather the storm,
Yeah.
and it will pass, and then you just keep going forward. Um,
Yep.
what kind of like is your experience balance been like versus like say working full time or on contract versus freelance? Is it like a 50-50 split, or have you been mainly freelance?
Yeah, so we'll speed run this. So basically, it's 2 years exclusively freelance, random illustrations, definitely a lot of Magic cards, AAA games, Xbox. I live in Detroit. Time to move to Seattle. So this is the other side of the country. This is the Pacific Northwest. I'm now introduced to games and this sort of like utopia of game development companies, right? ArenaNet, 343, Bungie, Xbox, like Valve, all these like titans are just out here, and it's like, and I'm in the thick of it, right? And Then after that, we can get into the details, but we're just gonna like
Sure,
go through a
sure.
timeline.
Yep.
After Xbox, applied to Bungie, didn't get it. Started working at Glue Mobile, which is a mobile company, on the Nicki Minaj top-down isometric mobile game for like
Okay.
a year, and then I spent about 4 years in casino games after that. Went back to AAA, worked on Crucible, which was Amazon's like battle royale AAA. It was like their sort of like first foray into like AAA game development.
Mm-hmm.
Then went back to casino games for about a year, and that's when I started getting really interesting, like film animation type work on like, I spent a little bit of time on the second and third season of Love, Death, and Robots, and that was all like, freelance,
Yes.
remote type stuff. Got a lot of like random illustration because social media is really starting to grow at this point, right? This is like 2016 into like 2019, just before the pandemic. A lot of like bands like Smashing Pumpkins and Tool and Deadmau5 are like wanting to like collaborate with me on posters and like merchandise and stuff through Instagram, through social media. So
Mm-hmm.
again, right, nothing to do with my concept art pipeline specific experience or casino games or mobile games, but like social media sort of brings everyone together in this like really unique way. And then pandemic hits. I spent some time at Lucasfilm Animation, about a year, something like that, and then uh, let's see, more freelance, more random freelance. I feel like between 22 to like 23, 24, and then all of last year was working at a AAA startup, remote, fully remote, with a bunch of Ubisoft and 343 people, right? And we were making the thing. It was for NetEase, and they shut us down just before the LA fires. Like so, like 2, 3 months ago, and it was cool. It was a really cool project, and
Mm-hmm.
made a lot of friends. Worked with a lot of people. Actually, worked with someone who I did at Xbox, and 10 years later ended up working with them again, eight,
Sick.
9, 10 years, something like that. Yeah, which is an interesting point that I'm sure we'll bring up more. Is just like you never know who you're going to work with, and you could
Mm-hmm.
have repeat coworkers, and again, the whole like knowing people and your network, and a lot of this is how you get work. The job that I got hired to do for the last year. That was like an Instagram connection, concept artist I'm friends with, and like yeah, it's been a very it's been
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
lot of bobbing and weaving and ups and downs, but it never seems to be like you're unemployed for more than like at this point like 3 to 4 months. Usually
Right,
something
right.
comes along, like in a comfy sense. You can always kind of go through the inbox and you might go like this one is like not what I would usually take for a raid, but like I got bills to pay, like why not? It doesn't look like too much
Yes.
work. There's a lot of that too. It's jobs you wouldn't even mention, and people do this all the time. You're juggling multiple things, but I prefer the in-house experience. If I could be completely honest, like I prefer the predictability of just here's my work, and now that's the weekend, or like it's now these hours are over. And I'm done. You can have that structure with freelance, but it's a lot harder when you're just sort of like no one's there to tell you to stop working, or you're not going to leave an office and go
Mm-hmm.
home. Like your office is in your home. Sometimes it's your
Mm-hmm.
actual bedroom and like you can kind of blur the lines between personal and professional life, but I
Yes.
do prefer the predictable 9 to 5 like studio setting, even if it's remote. I don't I have a hard time even now emotionally and literally juggling 5 or 6 projects at a time. They
Yes.
kind of cross pollinate and confuse me sometimes. So that's my preference. I don't do the freelance thing because I'm like I love it. I do it because it's the
Yeah.
option I have at the time, and it always a lot of these studios that I've worked at, these full time studios, they closed down. The Amazon thing, that's why I left. It's because it like our studio got shut down. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes you're forced to go back into the other thing that you don't prefer, and
Mm-hmm.
I just do it because like that's the option, and it has its pros as well. There's
Mm-hmm.
pros and cons to all this stuff. Just depends on what
Sure.
you prefer. But
Yes.
yeah,
Now that's interesting you mentioned that. That's going to be my follow-up question is, do you have a preference from one over the other? Have you put much thought into why you prefer the studio kind of like setup?
I don't know about yourself. You're probably similar to me. I feel like a lot of artists are. the act of creating artwork, right? Designing, problem solving, it is this for me, it's very academic and it's very thought out, but it's also like an emotional state. Like it is hard to make good stuff when you are emotionally distressed is the most candid way I could put it. Like I I become stressed out in certain circumstances, and sometimes that is freelancing. Not always, not just inherently, but like the predictability and the sort of like cleanly packaged nature of like you are in
Hmm.
a pipeline at a studio full time, you have your salary, it's predictable, you get your paychecks at this time every month, you even have medical benefits you have, and that's a whole interesting thing here in the States, unlike most other places it seems, but yeah, like there are certain circumstances that affect my personal life, and like I just seem to have like a lot more mental clarity and a lot more bandwidth for creative needs, you know, for making artwork when I'm in like a more predictable environment. And
Hmm.
sometimes freelance is that predictable environment. Like technically, I guess you could say that 1 year project I worked on that just got canceled, that was actually technically freelance. You know, I was a contractor, I was sending invoices every month, but it was there was office hours. Everyone did the 9 to 5 thing. It was a full time. It might as well have been a salaried position, and it was about to
Hmm.
be in an official sense before we were shut down. But like, yeah, it's more about I guess predictability and also being able to singularly focus on one project at a time. I find to be my preference, just because I if I'm juggling too many things at once, like I said, there can be cross pollination. Sometimes it's almost like your ideas are like crossing over into other projects because you're doing like three things at once. And yeah, like I don't know, I can't like necessarily like switch gears so effortlessly. I feel
Hmm.
like there's a certain degree that I can and I do, but like yeah, I really look at like when I look in hindsight, like let's look at what you actually did while you were in those circumstances, whether it be crazy freelance or more predictable. And it's like almost always the best work I make is because I was in like a very, comfortable environment and it was
Hmm.
just ideal working circumstances for me. Like it let my brain focus
Hmm.
on one thing and not 50 things. Some
Hmm.
people prefer it the other way. Some people love to be like more nomadic and I'm going to jump from this to this, and it's just not my preference, but I'll do it if I need to.
Mm. Now that's super interesting. And just to clarify, when you were working for the companies, was that on site or was that still kind of remote? But it was more the structure that they offered kind of felt like was more beneficial to you.
You know, I It's
Or,
so yeah, like the last thing that I was on was remote, but like we'll say Xbox, right? I was on site in a
mm,
studio. The mobile game, the Nicki Minaj thing, that was on site. Remote work for the casino games, remote work for Love, Death and Robots, remote work for Lucasfilm. Even though I think the caveat there was eventually I would move to SF and like be in the office. It's
yes.
you got to keep in mind too, right? Like the world was locked down at one point during all of this, so it's like but I think a lot of companies were like we're going to go back in eventually. And that's some people weren't okay with that, some people are. It's yeah, it was a mixture of both. But
Mm,
I mean, on the last thing I was on, I guess it was nice to not have to commute and not be like in an office sort of dealing with like a lot of the meetings that might come with the artwork that you still have to do because you're remote, and you're just able to just sit and do your tasks and bang out a bunch of like awesome stuff. But it has that full time salaried predictability because it's even though it's contract technically it's like the physical comfort of remote work from home, but with like the predictability of like a
mm,
in-house studio gig based on that structure. So it's all varied, right? But I've done on-site, I've done from home. I think I don't know, like they both have their benefits. Like I don't learn nearly as much working by myself, like in my own
mhm,
office all alone,
mm,
like as when I'm like in a shared cubicle space and there's people. I'm watching people paint and draw, and I'm like, oh, like that's how you do that. Or hey, real quick, like show me what you did right there. It also makes communication way faster, right? You don't have to schedule a meeting. You can just literally walk over and be like, hey, that's nice too. Like it just depends on what you prefer. Sometimes, that comes with a crazy commute. Like here in Los Angeles, like you might have to drive an hour or two just to get to your office. That's
Mm,
4 hours out of the day potentially, right? That's like half of a workday almost, and you're just
yeah.
getting to your job. Like so it varies. I've done the commute thing. I've done work from home. I've done in-house. They all have pros and cons. I
Yes.
I think as long as it's predictable and it's a singular project, that is sort of my preference overall.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Do you think if you had only ever been in a studio, do you think you'd have the kind of itch to think freelance is like, the grass is greener kind of thing? Or do you, like, knowing yourself, would understand that, no, this is what's good for me or what I
I
prefer?
I think I'd have to have the experience of both to
Yeah.
really know, like, with certainty. So I probably would have been curious, like,
Mm,
never done that before. Like, that sounds kind of nice. And sometimes people do that. I've seen people like leave a thing that they've known exclusively, which is the like predictable 9 to 5. I'm in house somewhere, and they're like, I'm gonna try freelance for a while, and then it turned out it wasn't for them, and they went back. Some people, it turns out it is for them, and they thrived and they exploded. It's very nuanced and very circumstantial, but I think
mm,
I would have been curious probably because I
mm,
just never done it before.
mm-hmm. No,
Yeah,
perfect. It's a fascinating topic for me. As a creative, I've only ever worked freelance.
yeah,
And knowing myself, like, it suits my life being freelance, suits the family being freelance. Um, and it's probably the way to go forward for me. But I do like, I like yourself, like I would thrive, and I know for a fact I would thrive in that in-person setting with
hmm,
people, being in a place, that structure that you mentioned as well. Like that is something that I know, like, I would definitely just enjoy. Whether I thrive in it or not, obviously that's we will find out if that's the case.
hmm,
Reason being, because when I have worked in teams and companies and stuff, it wasn't non-creative jobs, but the jobs are terrible, dead end, boring. However, being in a team with people you like your teammates, you soldier with, and you when it was sales, like you're hunting together to get targets and what have you, knowing how what that means for the end of the month with your paycheck for people and what have you. There's something powerful with that as well, and I think as from a creative as well, like you just mentioned there, picking up tips, sharing ideas, just kind of like use the word before about cross pollination, like in that instance as well. Like there's definitely something to that as well. And yeah, I think it's just super fascinating. And I've spoken to many people as well who it's the complete opposite. It's a case of studio was fine, but then the freelancers where they kind of flourished as well.
sure.
So would you say like you are more productive? Obviously your preference is like like in studio and that kind of setup, all that structure, but would you say you're more productive in that place or versus freelance, or is it the same?
I would say probably in terms of just producing artwork, probably more productive, like just by myself, just
Mm-hmm.
freelancing, especially like in a remote sense. But it's interesting because I know I said, well, I learn more with other people, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll just tell you a quick little story. Like my brand, the weird, fleshy, biomechanical, like deity creature guy that I am now, that came from an interesting place of there was a time, I'd say between 2012 to like 2016, right? So 4 years, I looked like anyone else on ArtStation. And that's not a bad thing. It's just I didn't have like an identity, not really as an artist. I produced quality work, but just didn't stand out too much from everyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like working remotely for that casino games company, I noticed that the compared to the AAA and even the mobile, we'll call it the grind, right? It didn't require nearly as much bandwidth. The work wasn't as like taxing on me, and I was left with all this like energy creatively at the end of the day, right? Like, and I'm working remotely, which is this sort of like unheard thing of at the time because it's 2016 and like no one hires you remote. You got to move everywhere to work. You got to like be in house, right? So it was this cushy, unique thing at the time of like, man, like the work isn't too hard, and like I've got all this skill and bandwidth I've made. skill I've made, bandwidth I have, I'm gonna, maybe make some personal art. And like, I don't know, what does that look like? Well, I guess I'm coming from a place of privilege here, right? Because I do think a lot of people, this is something I talk about a lot. I do think a lot of people are making art and being the artist that they think they should be, not the one they actually enjoy being or the one they want to be. And I
Hmm.
get it. Hireability, marketability, like industry standards, industry pressures, like all of these things coalesce and affect people's decisions and their career paths. But zooming out, not having that need to make money, right? And just sort of having coming from a complete place of freedom and going in an unbiased way when you're not getting paid to do anything, what would you make art wise? And that's where I started looking at the old art books that, all the world building, all the sort of like surreal artwork, right? Like a lot of like Sergio Topi, a lot of Wayne Barlow, a lot of like Salvador Dali, Bikshinsky, Jodorowsky, right? His like crazy
Hmm.
Dune movie that never was. Like I was just like, this stuff really interests me, and like I don't see a market for it at the time, but like I just want to make some art. So I would make art and then I'd post it online, and social media started to grow for me. There was reaction, and like I sort of like found through that sort of like side renaissance side artwork thing that I was doing, we'll call it like a personal project. There was a renaissance for me
Hmm.
creatively that ended up becoming the whole brand and identity that I am known by today. Like the all the stuff I showed you post, or I mentioned post 2016, pre 2016, excuse me, it would be unrecognizable. You'd be like, this looks like a completely different artist. And it like I said, it took that sort of like again from a place of courage or place of privilege, but like that sort of moment of courage to be like, hey, don't worry about getting hired. Just make art that you like. Which a lot of people I don't think even consider. I
Hmm.
think a lot of people's entire direction and path creatively is a lot of times dictated by just everything else I mentioned, but the thing they really want to do
Hmm.
because they just don't see a path forward with it. And they go, this is how I make money. This is success. This is what I have to do, not what I want to do. But when you stop and go, what do you actually like enjoy doing? That's when I realized like, oh, it's all the weird stuff I'm known by today. But like, and again, that comes from a place of comfort, being like, I already have a job that pays my bills, so like I
Hmm.
have the freedom to think about this a little bit more. I don't think up until that point I had that luxury because of all the circumstances, but that little microcosm, like moment in time, let me sort of figure out who I actually was creatively. But
Hmm.
it did take about 4 years of making sort of like more homogenized, generic looking fantasy stuff to realize like I don't
Hmm.
actually like doing this.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that's a great segue into talking about just your personal work in general and the
yeah.
style and obviously where it comes from. And that's a beautiful origin story. And I like how organic it is. Like I don't know. There's something about when something happens organically, like it's relatable in a weird way for me. Like it's just because it came from maybe like some kind of pressure from something else or lack of pressure that it kind of just birthed out of that thing. And yeah, it's curious that it was more from just doing work. And I think at a certain stage, every artist, wherever they're in their career, will have that moment, especially I think with concept art, because
Mm.
with a lot of the briefs, a lot of the gigs that we get, it is typically in that kind of generic kind of like box of like what's expected. And sure, there's some projects that we really want to push the boat out, but there's that kind of like, I guess like if you're a chef, you want to try, like fancy flavors, what have you. The consumer will always want something that they kind of understand. So therefore, they kind of like play it safe rather than like I don't know, use snails and I don't know caterpillars or whatever. Um, but yeah, like so, did that kind of like ever peek its head out, like when you were doing that all that kind of work? Like, hey, let's try this. Let's go. Like let's go wild. Or was it literally that almost like a singular moment, like a big bang, so to speak, that it just oh hey, let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I think part of what, if you remember back to me mentioning, applying for Bungie and not getting
Yes.
it, I First of all, for some reason, a lot of people think I've worked at Bungie, and like I've never. I just want to clear that up right now. I've never worked with them. Would love to, someday
Yeah.
that would be cool. But like I know a ton of people that have. But I wanted to so badly. It was like my
Hmm.
dream job. Which by the way, I don't really have a dream job anymore. Like, I guess the closest thing to a dream job I could think of is like, what if you could just only make personal art and get paid for it?
Mm.
And I think that's sort of like the like, the thing that a lot of people like, it's like maybe one day I can be James Jean too.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
that's sort of the North Star, right? It doesn't mean you can't also enjoy all the other stuff too,
Sure.
and I do still. It's just maybe that would be the most perfect thing. But what else would be really awesome too is, yeah, like Bungie could be cool, and at the time I was like, that was my dream job, right? Like that was my new Wizards of the Coast. I was like, I have to work there, but it wasn't my destiny. So, like but what drew me to that IP? What drew me to the artists working there? A lot of them were referencing all the weird stuff I just mentioned, right? Like the Hive are literally like Bikshinsky, like all of his work, right? Like there's so much. I don't really see Geiger in there, but there's so much like Destiny is its own special universe, but it's had 10 years to reference all this stuff that came before it, and it
Mm.
does. And that's a lot of times I'll get like, like comments, like flyby comments now on my artwork, especially the personal stuff. It's like, oh, like I see you like Destiny. And it's like, I do like Destiny, but actually I like all the stuff that inspires Destiny
Mm.
because you just do the math chronologically, right? But they're a player. They don't know how this stuff gets
Yeah,
made. They're
sure,
not going to
sure.
know like what Geiger or Bikshinsky into this stuff is. So I get it. Um, but I think when I was making that Bungie portfolio, because I'm sort of also targeting, you know, uh, like the visual benchmarks of Destiny and the stuff I had seen so far, like I think that's when I started to kind of like I realized like, wait, why do you enjoy like making this Bungie portfolio specifically, right? And it's like because it's like they're that whole world, right? A lot of it references the stuff that also inspired you, but you haven't figured it out yet. Like, like that you too like to draw like almost like Hive-esque, Big Shinsky Geiger looking things too. But like that looks like a really cool video game. I just think it looks cool. I can't tell you
Mm.
why, but I'm gonna draw some of the stuff that I think could exist in that and make like a hire me Bungie portfolio, which didn't really go anywhere. But I think little snippets of like I'm gonna attempt to work for a company that is inspired by the kinds of things that I'm also inspired by. I think like there were moments like that, but nothing really that said like you're gonna like do like acid looking stuff one day,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
real Scavengers Reign looking stuff.
Yes.
I think it just kind of like happened in that weird, creative sort of vacuum, free circumstantial situation.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sick. Um, when did it kind of like become a thing? Like when did it kind of like like generate enough mass to kind of like flourish to where it is now?
Yeah, like 2016, right? Started making, if you go through ArtStation, right, there's all these like old collections, like, and like literally the collections are called like Your Mom 2, Your Mom 3. Like
Yeah.
it's me just going like, I don't know why I'm drawing this stuff, but I just like it. And then when I hit one of the pieces, it's called Ritual, which is a very Dali looking piece. It's these like very vertical creatures with long arms, right? And they're sort of scooping up these little explorer, like they're mostly there for scale, just like tiny little people in like a caravan. uh
Yes.
they're sort of on this pilgrimage, right? And it's this sort of like spiritually enlightening, holy, strange, otherworldly image, which I think is sort of it's almost like metaphorical too when I really
Hmm.
look at it in hindsight, of like you made this piece, and what you don't realize is it sort of like represents you've really hit your style. Like that one specific piece was when the people were like, what is this universe you're building, and like, will it be a book, is it going to be a movie, like what is this, Robbie? Like it's the best stuff you've ever made. The
Yes.
feedback was like explosive on that piece, and then mostly every other piece after that, is when I like really hit my stride. But I look at that specific piece, Ritual, and it's like there's so much symbolism, ironically, in the hands are sort of scooping up these tiny little people, and it's almost like in my mind the people represent you being sort of like you're metaphorically being lifted from all of the industry pressures and all of the things that hold you back from sort of being creatively the person that you're probably meant to be. And by like transcending that, right, i.e. getting like lifted up by these things into like the heavens because they're basically up in clouds, to me it sort of represents like, oh, this is like you on a, like a creative level transcending like, things, like circumstances, and just finding your creative voice, which is all very like Hallmark card sounding stuff, but
Hmm.
like I think that's what happened sort of unintentionally. Is it was like, oh, you're doing your thing now. Like it took a second, but you're doing it now. And you've got some really interesting art, and people are really responding and getting that positive feedback lets you, it just encourages you to keep like leaning
Hmm.
into it and making more of it. And that's kind of how I got to that point. Yeah.
Sick. Um, does it? Is there any particular aspect about your style, or like, did it all exist in this world, or is it more just what you're creating? Like, do they kind of link to each other?
I think I think there's like overlapping like themes and aesthetics, like details and visual. I call them visual landmarks, which is just like, it's
Yes.
like motifs and like callbacks to certain things. But like that ritual piece definitely was like, start writing stuff. Just try.
Mm.
Just see what you can come up with, right? And make a narrative out of it. It's like the art sort of came first, and that inspired some writing, and now the writing kind of like helps guide that world like in a sequential sense, and now there's like more purpose. But initially it was like big vacuum, make a bunch of stuff, do some blue sky stuff, we'll see what sticks. And that wasn't even my thinking back then either. It was just, I'm going to draw stuff I enjoy. But
Hmm.
then like, sort of having that like, whoa, this is a solid piece. Like there's something here. The ritual piece is where it was like, I could see a world of this stuff, and the to be clear, the deity stuff, which is like the most recent stuff, like that doesn't relate in a narrative sense to the Numinous stuff, which is that's what I call it. The world of Numinous is the
Okay.
ritual world. All the fleshy, scavengers reign,
Yes.
biomechanical
Yes.
looking stuff. That is a like a book project now, Numinous. It is all, there's writing, and you can see some of the writing in some of the images. Like there's little
Hmm.
passages on the sides. Some of it's more like just singular images that stand still, but like are part of that story. There's a narrative now with that world, but yeah, it started as just like random drawings. Absolutely.
Um, Amazing. And was the writing also something that was organic as well? Like, it was a case of this needs writing, or like a strategy through writing?
I think not being a writer was, oh man, writing is its own art form, right? And I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm a writer too, because I'm not. But I did some writing. I got help from friends who were more skilled that like helped me sort of like refine and proofread and contextualize some of the writing. And even at one point, I had a friend of mine like co-write with me, and he is a writer, and he's, this is a guy who like extensively knows like all the codexes of like Warhammer 40K, right? He's like through and through a like world building nerd, and this is a perfect guy to have like help you figure out this world like in a written sense. Um, Definitely, like the writing stuff was hard, and at first was just sort of to contextualize things, but then the more
Hmm.
we wrote, the more we expanded on like some kind of, think of it more as lore and less as like a really thought out George R. R. Martin
Yes.
novel, because it's not
Yeah.
that. It's more 50-50. Not even, I'd say 70-30. It's like 30% writing, 70% art, but there's just enough
Okay.
writing there to sort of like push the narrative along and not leave you with only question marks, because a lot of
Mm.
it's very weird, very out there
Hmm.
stuff, and that's part of it. I think that's the main draw, and I think what I learned by writing, co-writing with a friend on it, is the more questions we answered, the less appealing the art was, and like the less invested we became in the story. And it made me realize a big part of this sort of surrealist world that you've accidentally built is there needs to be some mystery there. Like it's kind of like
Yes.
watching, if you've seen Annihilation, right? The Natalie Portman
Yes.
movie, right? There's some wild stuff that happens in that movie, and it's so thought provoking and so engaging. And I do rewatch it like maybe like once a year. But
Hmm.
I remember the first time watching it and being so just like, where is this all going? And if I had
Yes.
known sooner the ending, I would have, my investment would have been pulled a lot quicker. And it's just one of those things where I think like there needs to be kind of like Aliens 1 before they show the xenomorph, or like Predator 1 before the mask comes off. It's like mystery and the unknown invites interest, it invites questions. It is part of the experience. So once you know everything, like there's nothing left to try to figure out. And I don't think everything
Mhm.
needs an answer. I think you should
I agree. Yeah.
you should be allowed to create your own ending. So like I'll say like there is an ending to all this sort of in the works, but it's still not going to be really like, yeah, we'll spoon feed you everything. It's kind of like, how about you like kind of take from it what you will? Because I think,
Hmm.
and this isn't for everyone, right? This is my project. Like
Sure. Sure.
not everyone likes A24 movies that are super weird. I do though,
Yeah.
because sometimes they
Me
just
too.
let you kind of go like, hey, you come up with the ending, or like take from that what you will. And that's, I think that's what I learned. Like that's the appeal of something like the Numinous stuff, is like you need a little bit of mystery. You need to invite questions, like those thought-provoking images. Like that's what appeals, is the unknown, I think.
Excellent. That's music to my ears and my creative ears as well.
Mm,
Um, yeah, that's something that just geeking out with my brother and my dad over the years. Since I was a kid and talking about movies. My dad's someone who requires resolution. He doesn't like the fact that there's like a loose ends. And
yeah, yeah,
we always have this debate. My brother and I have embraced. Obviously, as a kid, you just want to know what happens. You don't want to like have no loose ends. But over time, we cherish that. Like I absolutely cherish the fact that if it doesn't give me what I want, but I'm still kind of invested or it's still kind of spinning in my head,
yeah.
that adds way more value to the experience than if I'm just told what to happen. Like, just a very quick example. Inception. Does that totem
Mm,
topple or not? And just cutting it away.
mm.
Like, still to this day, I don't like the fact that I don't know, but I respect that I don't know. And I understand why it was done. But with that said, for an audience member, like again, with your work and looking at what you've built, that intrigue is what captures me and what I invest in the most, like with things that I look at. And it's like, what is this? Why is it this way? What would it like to be there? And like especially like something that does not look remotely to anything that we've kind of seen in our real world. What's it like as a creator though? Like you said, like you kind of know the answers. Does it stifle your creativity and even your enjoyment in building this world?
No, no, because I just love to create the unexpected, and that's what I've learned. And it's a hard place to be in, like as a creative, because when you realize the thing you love is like the least marketable thing, it makes getting hired that much more difficult. And to be clear, I think there's a change in like trends and like what companies make, and like I think there's a lot more opportunity now, but at the time it was like no one's going to hire you for this. Like what is the point? And I was like,
Mm.
I just love creating intriguing imagery that like has a lot of the unexpected. It's I don't know, man. We observe the world every day, but like I can just Google what a gun looks like. I don't, where's the like real like world building, like on the sense
Yeah.
that I'm talking about. It's, I observe the world every single day. I see people with faces, and that's why a lot of my creatures and characters don't have faces, because I'd rather try to understand a sentient being in different ways with how they pose their hands, or like their anatomy, or like
Mm.
runic glyphs and writing. And, it's, to me, it's like we are in reality already. Why not go someplace different? And I don't think in
Mm-hmm.
this lifetime, unless I do a ton of drugs or something, or get on a space shuttle because someone lets me, like I'm not gonna see other worlds. So I'd rather like
Yes.
build it and not wait. And that's what the art stuff is. It's me going to places that I want to see and I want to share with other people. Because like we're here now, and the real world is what it is, and it's still gonna be that in this lifetime. And yeah, I'm just bored. I just want to see some new stuff, man.
Sick. Geeking out about like say the technical side of things, what kind of like process and workflow do you use for this? Like, does it vary between piece to piece, or has it, like you mentioned, like the style and the subject matter is kind of like one pillar of the project. The writing is another. Is sometimes like tools and technique is also another pillar as well. Is that the case, or does it vary from piece to piece?
It's pretty predictable now, I guess, but I mean, as I learn more and more like tools like 3D, and I'm sure, like, I know like a decent amount of ZBrush and Blender now, especially Blender. The idea of like potentially like sculpting and animating some of these things with like, a cool Trevino-esque cell shaded shader or something on it, like just to make like a short film, right? Kind of like what what's his name, Florent Lebrun did with his like recent.
Yes,
Did you see that short film in Blender? Like
yes,
beautiful. His
yes,
stuff's beautiful.
yeah.
Such a beautiful short film he made, and like that's yeah, like there's different ways that we could build this world, like literally with tools as an artist, but also like show it and experience it with other people, whether it's like an animated short or maybe like I 3D print one of my sculpts and then someone can like hand paint it. Like there's like it's the what I'm learning as like my I guess tool bag of skills increases is like there's more than one way to make this world, and it kind of is changing, like I guess you could say behind the scenes as I learn new skills, because
Mm-hmm.
I could keep painting digital paintings, and I love doing that, and it's all I've known for like 13 years now, but
Mm-hmm.
there's other possibilities too, and that's really exciting. So the process will probably change at some point when I can find the time to keep working on this. I'm not actively working on it right now. I was
Sure.
for a while. Busy doing a few other things, but yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or not, but
Oh
yeah.
no, no, it does definitely. And
Okay.
that's like it's interesting to hear as well, like the tools almost, if you like, whether it's you learning them or whatever's developed, is opening other ways to tell the story. Like when
Yeah.
you first started this, obviously you were like imagining the world and exploring it in your own brain. I don't know if this is a weird question, but like when you are thinking of these things when you're making them, are they moving things? Do you almost like see it as like a moving picture,
Yes.
as a story? Okay,
Oh no,
okay.
they are. They are. I mean, a big part of it, like I've thought about, like, just even messing around a little bit with Unreal, right? Trying to think like, if in a world building engine, like, what could you do? Like, what could you, Robbie, do with this right now? And it's like, well, if I like just learn the UI a little bit more, if I, build out like some like much better looking 3D assets and figure out a cool way to like make them look like the static art, right? But it's 3D now, it's Z space, and you can orbit it. Um, like like what would you do with Numinous? What could it be? And I thought, like the thing about that specific IP is like there isn't like really violence and conflict in the way that you would get from say like I don't know, like a survival horror game or something. Even though there's a lot of, you could say, body horror-esque type stuff
Mm-hmm.
maybe in it with the exposed anatomy, it's more about like mystery and intrigue. It's almost like an acid trip music video, right? But what if you could
Mm-hmm.
interact with that music video? And that, I think of games like Journey, I think of like puzzle games, I think like an AR VR type puzzle game would be really interesting where you're sort of like you come to a door, but it's not what you think it is. It's a character. They're somewhat humanoid, but they have like like there's this creature called the mold witch that I have that has like something like 10, 15 arms behind it. What if you were to approach this mold witch character, and as a player you sort of like reorient like a puzzle, right? You orientate its arms to configure in certain patterns, almost like you're creating hieroglyphic symbols, and like that suddenly unlocks the door, and then the character splits open, and now it's a pathway into like another part of Numinous, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to think of ways that like you could like anatomically like interact with characters, and it turns out it's like actually not just a character, it's a sentient doorway to like another part of the map of Numinous, right? Like that's kind of where in my brain, as even as I'm painting things, I'm like like what could happen if this was moving and it wasn't just a static image? And that
Mm-hmm.
thinking does inform a lot of the art itself. Because yeah, I think we're telling a story here, even if it's like a very mysterious one that lets you kind of decide the ending. Yeah, I don't just think like, well, that kind of looks cool. It's like, no, but what if it actually looks cool and it also does this cool thing?
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned that you're not working on it right now. Like, how often do you get to spend on it? And is it more like in patches? Is it in runs, or is it an intentional thing while you're not working on it currently?
Yeah, no, I'm just busy with other stuff right now. It's like I will pick it up. Like I got that whole deity thing that I'm doing, which is it's very what's the word? It's almost like if Numinous wasn't fleshy and it was more like elegant and like really well packaged in like a I'm trying to think of the word for it. I'm thinking back to like old sculptures and time periods. I don't know the exact. It's not Art Deco and it's not Art Nouveau. What am I thinking of? Just think about the stuff that inspired Raised by Wolves. Have you seen that?
Oh, I was just going to mention that. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The sort of like Atlas bronze statue T pose that the
Yes.
necromancer does when she weaponizes and floats, like that sort of like classic bronze gold era of like
Mm-hmm.
cement and brutalist architecture and lots of sculptural reliefs and very hard rectilinear form language, all of that like polygonal type stuff, like that's a lot of that is what inspires like the elegance and I guess you could say like the aesthetic, maybe even the beauty behind like the Deity series, right? And
Yes.
that's me sort of working on you know uh other things that interest me, and that it's just another sort of like creative box that I'm playing in. We'll put it that way. It's
Mm.
not like the Numinous thing. It's another thing that is its own thing, and I want to pick it up and work on it again. But I'm having fun in this other world, making other stuff that also interests me. So
Mm.
I guess like I think it's one of those things where you look at someone who works on multiple personal projects at a time, right? Like Darren Barley is like such a good example of this, right? That dude has like five or six different things and they all look very different from each other, and he clearly has a blast in each one of those universes. And it's like I think it's a similar thing where it's like, oh, I've hit another interesting thing here, and it's
Mm.
really cohesive, and it speaks to people and it speaks to me, and it's working on its own, and there's something special here. I don't think you could have more than one Numinous is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
so
Sure.
so but I'm also just busy with work stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's I'd like to pick it up, but I think if I had the time to work on my own stuff, it
Mm.
wouldn't be that project. It would be the other thing I'm working on.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
When you have this thing where you want to work on, but obviously you can't because of responsibilities. When you get back to it, is it kind of, do you pick up where you left off, or do you kind of have a new insight into things? And does it kind of change? If that makes sense.
You know, I guess I'd have to really You know what? No, it doesn't change. It's funny
Oh.
actually. I am so it's almost like just literally picking up a series that you put down to the exact episode that you left off at. And maybe you need like a little reminder, right? Like let's do a little quick rewind and just make sure like we're all caught up just so we remember. But it's like, yeah, if I didn't finish a thing that I want to finish, I'm gonna finish it because I'm only gonna be thinking about it before I move on to the next thing. I don't know why that is, but I really get fixated on something, and I might have to put it down for months, maybe even a year. But when I get back to it, it's this thing of like, oh, like it's like going to your favorite vacation spot where you're like, oh man, I remember this. This feels
Yeah.
good. Like I'm here. It's almost like being on vacation. You're just like personal art. Like I'm so excited, and yeah, it's its own special thing, and I pretty much pick it up exactly where I left off. I don't think I really like, you know what I mean? I don't think I really change it.
Sick. I like that analogy. Like it's your art's like that project's like a vacation, and it's just pure
It
like,
is.
I guess, like a form of indulgence. So you mentioned it's becoming a book. How far, obviously, whatever you can reveal, like how did that come about? How far is that close to happening? And what's that adventure been like?
Yeah, I did it. So let's see. I made a physically tangible book, like as a very small test print run of everything I had made for Numinous up to that point in 2019. It was for Emerald City Comic Con, which is like Seattle's Comic Con. And I would say this book was probably like a third of the actual size that I would take to a publisher and be like, let's do a Kickstarter or whatever and like actually get this thing out to the masses. It was more of like a let's see if we can like put it all together, if I can actually make a product and not a project. And the two are very different. Anyone who's made
Mm-hmm.
anything knows it's like, yeah, JPEGs are one thing. Having like a book that's bound is another. uh, so But like we did like a test print run. I think I made 200 editions, maybe two. Yeah, I think 200, and they're small. We're talking like I think like 150 pages. I would want something like substantially thicker. I'm trying to think of something that's comparable to the size. It was probably like yeah, hold on. It was probably like it's probably like this thick, right?
Okay, okay,
If I had to guess. So almost like a magazine. And I was like, no, no, no. I want thick, right? Like I want
right,
probably like two more thirds if I
yes,
could. I want a book. And I would say so what I would say is that like I made a rough, a rough version of the book as a test run just to see how it did. And people liked it, it sold out. I got a good response. And it made me go, okay, you should like continue pushing into this and just make it even bigger. At one point, I kind of thought like maybe I'll do like yearly. This is me underestimating the reality of like the amount of work that goes into making a book. I thought before the pandemic, I was like, all right, this little sliver of a book did good in 2019. Why don't I just release one of these every year? And then, I started kind of planning on doing that, and then once the pandemic hit, thankfully it like put me in my place with reality, made me realize like, okay, you actually there's no way you could do this every year. This is
mm,
like 2 or 3 years worth of personal work here or there. You think you could do all this focused in 1 year? It's like maybe if you had no need to make money and this was your full-time job for a whole
mm,
12 months. But I've never been in that situation and I'm still not. So like the book, I guess you could say a rough version of it, like a rough draft has come out, and I'd like to get back to that and have like something more substantial, and then like make a proper print run with like a hardcover, and
mm-hmm,
go with a publisher, and get people get it in people's hands. But I would want to do it the right way in my mind. To
sure.
me, that's
Oh,
the
that's
right way.
awesome. And
Yeah.
do you feel like any unnecessary pressure when you do something like that? Obviously, there's always like, like you want to do something, especially when you're trying to sell something, you want to make sure it's correct and it's right and it's how you want it to be. But basically, is it intimidating, this process, or is it almost liberating and like fun getting this built and building this project?
It's fun because of the way I've very intentionally structured it to
Mm,
unfold. Like I'm right now I'm making like I guess you could say pages that will eventually become a book. If I was to say this is hypothetical, but if I was to say run a Kickstarter, the product isn't done, it's not at the printers and took people's money, then I would feel a pressure to be like, you
okay.
literally have to finish this. Like, and some people do that. Some people like, I get it. Like, I've backed Kickstarters where like the product took like 2 something years, 2 plus years to get into my hands,
Yes.
and I was like, hey, for me, I was like, you just make it and make it right. Like, I don't care when I get it. This is like $40 for me. It's not like I'm
Yes.
like broke or something from it. Um, but I know that if I had gone that route, I would feel a pressure to deliver a product, and I don't think that would. I think it would interfere with like the creative, unbiased nature of actually making the thing, and it might actually affect the creative outcome of the product itself. Like it might. I might just like start half-assing paintings just under this
Hmm.
pressure to like get it done quicker, and it turns out that it like I think there would be a quality dip. I really do. For me personally, I think in a more ideal situation, and this is the way I have it right now, is I've never taken anyone's money because like I don't know when the book will ever get done, but I know that if I was going to going to make a book, I would only talk about it when it's like right at the printers and it's
Hmm.
about to be an actual product, and only then would I, even mention it to people, let alone maybe take their
Mm,
money. I couldn't do the other way around, but I get that some people can, and some people like they have to sort of almost like take a salary sort of investment from like a Kickstarter fund, let's say, because that's the thing that allows them to like not work and only make the book, and then they make the
hmm.
book and then it
Hmm.
comes out. Like there's that approach too. I just feel like I'd have too much pressure and might collapse in on
Mm.
myself.
Do you have any other things you would like to do alongside these? Obviously, like you mentioned, the deity one, like it could be like, I guess not like a spin-off, but it's like its own little kind of thread. Do you have other threads that you'd like to explore, even something completely different? Or is this kind of like the thing that gets your attention and what you want to, grow at the moment?
So I would say I don't know why. I maybe it's from having all these different like little career stepping stones, right? And not only being in a AAA game studio for like 20 years or whatever. I I see art in so many different forms. Like I could see here. I'll literally 1 second on camera. It's fine. Why do we have to like look at art through just a screen? What if it could literally be like your art on say like a skate deck, right? And this isn't a prototype or anything. This is me just having fun with ink, you know, just sort of making personal art, but applying it in a different context, Your art could go on a card, it could go on fashion, apparel, sneakers, streetwear, skate decks. Being a car guy, right? I've mocked up. You can probably find it on my Instagram. I've mocked up like my art wrapping around like exotic cars, like car wraps, like
Sick.
Lamborghinis, and like it's almost like being a James Jean at that point, where you're going like,
Yes.
we're gonna combine my art with everything, and what does that look like? And I didn't always have that sort of creative scope for my work. It was definitely I don't know. I feel like it started happening around maybe like the casino game. Maybe that's a part of it. The casino games thing, especially because that was what 2016. That's when I started making like cabinet art that would go around the physical slot machine. When you go
Right.
to like a casino or wherever, as well as the digital art that goes into like the UI and it's all the symbols and the all that stuff on the screen. Like I would do all that too. But I think seeing your art in a context other than just on a square, a rectangular piece of paper, or like a horizontal screen, I think that began to open my eyes to like there's more than one way to do this, and like all these
Mm.
skills translate. Like you could, if you're learning 3D, you could take your 2D ideas, and if it's good enough, you could make a 3D print of them, or you could find someone who could also make a 3D print of them, and then you go into like business together or something. Like there's so many,
Mm-hmm.
like I've got kits and miniatures and things that I've built myself. Like I appreciate the tactile, hands-on, and fun experience of like painting and like weathering and kit building and stuff too. Like so like why couldn't you do something like that with your own art as well? Like it's just a matter of
Mm-hmm.
figuring out like what looks good and what combination, and like where, just how do you want people to see your art and experience it? Do they want to hold it in their hands in the form of a book? Do they want to like literally wear it on themselves? Do they want to have it on their car? Do they want to like wear it on their shoes? Do they want to like do kickflips with it as it's under their feet, because it's on a skate deck? Like there's so many things you could do, and I just know, coming from concept art, or like, I guess not me specifically, but just knowing so many people in that industry and even illustration who have only ever done book covers or only ever done card
Mm-hmm.
art. People think in a very linear fashion sometimes. They can't imagine what other uses their art could be for. And it's like I sometimes I think and I wonder, and that's me, messing around with those skate decks, and I would love to dip into all these things in some way, and I've attempted a few times, and like nothing's ever really come of it, but I'm definitely open to trying more and more. And that's just all, not to ramble too much, but it's all just to say that it's like there's so many things you could do with all this, and like you should just at least try. And that's, yeah, I think about that a lot. So it's like a really loaded
Mm-hmm.
answer, but the question, I mean, you could do anything really if you really wanted to. I just don't think people try.
Oh no, I love it, and I totally agree. Like it's something that I dwell upon, and at the moment, all I do is just on that square as well. Like mine's just on a screen or on a piece of paper, what have you. But I'm
Hmm.
always like, yeah, thinking like, what else could be done, and that creative process, that creative energy, doesn't always necessarily have to be like even with pen in hand, like you just said, or even just from marker making. It could be done in different ways, but it's still tapping into that same energy. Obviously, uh, uh, earlier you mentioned about different tools, and
Hmm.
I guess like starting out is more like traditional basic digital art with the stylus. Over time we've got 3D tools, you mentioned real time as well, before we jumped on the actual episode, we touched upon AI a little bit. Um, Seeing how quickly that is, I'll put it in air quotes, advancing. Um, in terms of like what it can do. Um, is that something that's kind of on your radar? Like like from what you can see nowadays, you just put your image into this thing and it can turn it into this moving thing. What's your take and what's your feeling around AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very polarizing topic. I totally understand. I love talking about it with people because it's so there's the industry, artist perspective, and then there's sort of like the rest of the world, which is it's
Yes.
interesting, right? I didn't realize how creatively we live in a very like smaller than you'd think bubble of like
Yes.
creatively informed people, right? The
Yes.
non-artists, I just call them muggles, right?
Yeah.
Look, no shade, right? But
Yes.
let's just call them muggles, right? They most of the world consumes, like a very small percentage of the world creates, and this goes for like people who design like the whole world around us, like the furniture I'm sitting in, like the architecture I live in, like the a street planner planned the pavement and
Mm-hmm.
the ground layout right just outside my house. It's like someone has thought of and intentionally designed the world that you live in, right? Most people don't even consider it. They take it for granted. I did too before I started making things for a living. Then I realized, oh, human thought it makes everything in the world, basically. Obviously, there's nature too, but I think you get what I'm saying. So
Mm-hmm.
once you consider those things, yeah, you're in this world of like, I'm unplugged, I'm red pilled from the matrix. I
Mm-hmm.
am aware. But all these other blue pilled people, right? Like you see it on Facebook, or I'm thinking of grandma, posting an AI image of being like, "Isn't it amazing that
Yeah.
this person was able to make this kingdom of sandcastles?" And you look at it and you're like, everything's melted and waxy, and it's like physically impossible for this thing to exist. And grandma doesn't know any better. She's still in the matrix. She's blue pilled. I was not aware until the AI stuff of just how creatively illiterate most of the world, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
visually illiterate most of the world is. And it's just ignorance. It's not malice or anything. But you see it and you go like, wow, everything's just a lie. And not yet, at least, I guess I should say. But eventually the lines are going to get blurred. They're already getting blurred where it's like there's some pretty convincing stuff out there that even I look at and I'm like, "Oh, wait. Oh, damn. I that one got me. Like I thought that was real. Like
Yes.
whatever it is, right?" Like but still, I don't know. I look at the AI stuff and there is still, at least in its current iteration, there is still a degree of uncanny valley. It's still kind of it lacks the humanity, right? The intent and the thought behind like most of the human made stuff. Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, it is at least the generative AI stuff. I'm talking like the JPEGs that Midjourney or Stable Diffusion produces. It's like a lot of it is smushed pixelated regurgitated information without a lot of intent, right? There's a like good forms and some color, but it's like it looks kind of good from a distance, but then you zoom in a bit and you're like, oh wow, like actually I see it. Most people don't. And that's where you begin to run into issues as a creative professional because it's we look and we go, this doesn't replace us, but someone running a company somewhere thinks it does enough. Is it as good as the human stuff? Mr. CEO man who's trying to cut costs, right, and like run a big multi-million dollar company. No, I guess maybe it doesn't look as good as the person's, the human stuff. But here's the thing: we're just trying to appease shareholders. We're just trying to like turn over good profits this quarter. It was never about good art. It was just about like, making
Mm-hmm.
money. So this is good enough. You're all fired, human artists. That's happening too. Maybe not everywhere as much as other places. I don't know. It's all very circumstantial. It's all over the place, all over the world. But what I see stateside, yes, is like it is good enough to some people on a corporate level or like hiring level to replace like the humans, you know, that are would technically do that art before it. And like that is It's frustrating. I mean, I would say it does affect me like in a very direct sense now. I certainly see, I mean, yes, there is the whole moral discussion as well, right? Like the data, like how is it sourced? Like, did we consent to this? Like, I would agree that like human learning and machine learning are not the same thing. I can't, like, it's such a crazy comparison to make, like, in my opinion. I think a lot of times people go like, oh, like the machine, I'm talking muggles again, right? Machine, like, it just observed Google the same way you did. And it's like, man, we don't even like, I can't even begin to tell you how like inaccurate that statement is. It's not true. Like, we know as like the red pilled, the creatively inclined people, it's like you can just see it a mile away. Like it's a lot of times it reads as soulless. It lacks that humanity, that storytelling, right? Like I could see maybe we're talking the current iteration. It's advancing fast. Like in another 2 years, it could be making Numinous-esque stuff, and then it could surpass, like, say, like a human artist like myself, rendering me on like a corporate hiring level completely irrelevant. That could happen too. I can't really control that. What I can control in the immediate sense, and what I've always been able to do, is like improve my own art, my artistic toolbox. Like I can always make human art. I don't know how long I'll be able to
Hmm.
make money off of it given like the way this is all headed, but until
Hmm.
that day comes when like it really is a sentient Skynet self-aware thing that it's been marketed to be, which we know that's not what's happening yet. Um like I'm just going to keep making human art for as long as humanly possible, which is something, by the way, Sid Mead told me when he gave a lecture at CCS, my school, many years ago. He said, when he was still alive, he said, to a student, I think, during Q&A, someone said, like, how long do you need to keep doing art? He said, as long as I'm physically able to. And
Mm.
I think that way as well, even with the AI stuff. I also don't know how all of this will legally proceed in the future. There's a lot of class action lawsuits, and I'm sure regulations and things will come into play too. I mean, who knows? It's, like China just released that new, is it DeepSeek? I can't remember the name. It's
Yes.
sort of like,
Yeah.
yeah, like it feels like an arms race on a corporate level.
Yes.
I would say, like, to me, I look and it just looks like a completely falsely marketed thing, designed to, the fact that it began as like, I think it was OpenAI, and they were designing, AI resources for research purposes, right? To sort of like
Hmm.
legally skirt around like what you're using copywritten data, like that's, and then they slowly pivot into a subscription for profit business model, and now there's all these legal loopholes and gray areas, and it's all, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not part of the class action lawsuit stuff, other than I guess you could say I'm in a database with many other people, and maybe I'm entitled to a payout if it comes to that one day. That's my
Hmm.
involvement, though. For the most part, I'm just an artist who is also like, I'm in this thing, I'm in this situation with all of you. I didn't ask to be here. I'm just an artist. I'm just making art. I On paper, conceptually, I'm like, this could be a really interesting tool that could like force multiply your abilities as an artist. Would I want it to do everything? No. There's a reason I draw and paint for a living. It's because I love to do it. Like the idea of a machine just doing that for me sounds
Yeah.
uninteresting. That being said, I'm aware that like if I designed my own AI system that only used my work and everything was legal, morally, and literally according to the law, right? Like I could see myself like being able to maybe take on more jobs and like work more efficiently. Like there's potential there like in a tool sense. But
Mm.
given the current sort of radioactive nature legally of like it's the data and morality and all these things that are all these issues, it's like, yeah, it's nothing that I'm want anything to do with at this time. But I'm also in it. Like I'm in the situation of like AI is a thing that exists now, and like how does that affect your life?
Hmm.
And it doesn't look like it's going to go away either. So it'll just change again, like it's been changing. So it's pretty
Mm.
wild, man. I think, was it 2022 when the first Mid-Journey stuff came out? I was
Yeah, I think
like,
so. Yeah.
yeah, what I saw was, and I played with it like I feel like everybody at least was like, what is
Yes.
this? Like I
Yeah.
definitely was like, oh, like I'm gonna generate like forms and patterns and things, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that's kind of cool. Like does it make a character that I would draw? Not even close. Like not even for
Mm-hmm.
like drawing over it, but maybe like there's a way you could repurpose like some of these textures and like, maybe those are like motifs that you reference for like a design. I looked at it as like I could make maybe like a mood board out of it. And then
Mm-hmm.
as stuff progressed and it was like, oh shit, it's like kind of just making like, and then insert like names of popular artists, like it's like almost one to one sort of like regurgitating stuff. Then it became this thing of like, oh, is this kind of like theft? I think it kind of is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's a very like loaded discussion. And early days when it was a very mysterious, nebulous kind of like, this could be a cool tool, I was very interested in. And maybe hypothetically it could be that one day, but yeah, right now it's this radioactive mess that I'm like, damn, like how did we get here? Like, and where is
Mm-hmm.
this all going? It's changing so fast. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. Actually, well put. I pretty much exactly feel the same way. The way you articulated it is way better than I've done over many episodes over the last few years trying to like explain it myself. Um, but like, has it? Do you think? Obviously, it has because, or it maybe will because, like, it's this background noise, right? Like, it's this thing that's maybe some people feel like it's the walls closing in, and it's always constantly thrown in our faces, whether we want it or not. Um, has it affected the way you create or want to create? Do you think?
No, nah. I know. Look, I know I know my value as an artist, and I know my place, like where I stand currently, like in this world, like in terms of reality. There's only it's almost like being like stuck in like a traffic jam or something. It's like I see people wailing on the horn in like gridlock traffic, and I'm like, do you think that's gonna make traffic move faster? Like you are sitting with us, just be with it and understand there's only so much you can control here, and just like ride weather the storm as it were, right? It's like I can't me personally, I can't like control AI and like where it's going to go. But what I can do is I can keep making art, the way I always have, the way I want to, and the way that speaks to people. And like that, to me, that is like my worth, like as a creative, is like the work I make. So it's like, why,
Mm-hmm.
like, no one's stopping you from doing that. Even if you don't get paid to do it, you can still do it. You could always go like wait tables or something. I don't want to be clear. I love getting paid to do the thing that I do, and I don't want it to
Mm-hmm.
go
Mm-hmm.
away. It's just like I was always an artist, even before I went to school. I just wasn't nearly as skilled on a technical level as I am now, but I've always drawn, as far as I can remember, building Legos and sculpting clay and drawing stuff. Like I can't even remember when I started. It's always just been a way of life for me, and it always will be. So yeah, the AI stuff, like I know it's disheartening and demoralizing for a lot of people, and I totally valid, totally understand where people are coming from with that. But I definitely don't sit there and go like, what's the point? It's like I'm not just
Mm-hmm.
gonna lay over and die because of a machine. Like not yet, not until it literally is
Yeah.
Skynet and they're like shooting us.
Yes.
And maybe we get there. I don't want us to, but like,
Yeah.
like don't worry, man. Just keep making art. Like seriously, I like you know what I mean? Like that's just
Yeah.
my personal opinion.
No, it's totally true. And I think, like you just said there, like maybe like a lot of the time, because obviously the world of bills and making a living, like we define getting paid as being the artist. But like you said perfectly, you're I believe like you're born one, that energy's there and it will always be there. Sid Mead is a testament to that, saying as long as I physically can do it, I will keep doing it. That you can't turn that off, whether it's a commercial venture or you can make money out of it or not. Like you're gonna keep doing it. I think that's a great time or point to wrap up the episode. But one final question from myself: what can we look forward to you moving forward, or things to watch out for from yourself?
AI art. No, I'm kidding. I just immediately flip the script. No, I mean, like in the immediate sense, well, I've got some educational content stuff coming out. That's it seems like between this podcast and like whenever the fire, like I think like right after the fires happened here in LA, it was maybe 2 weeks of just like wildness. like all these opportunities for like I think you reached out maybe like a month or two ago, like
Mm-hmm.
hey, like would you want to do something with Learn the Square, brainstorm, underpaint. Like there's a few places that are like, hey, like would you consider like sharing some knowledge with us, and it feels like very much an art center. I did a talk at Art Center recently. It feels like this is like a year of teaching and connection and growth, like on a human level, which is really exciting. So, there's some educational stuff coming out, like some courses and things, and who knows, maybe there could be something with Learn Square too one day. I don't know, like open to it. But yeah, other than that, maybe keep an eye out for some Numinous stuff. I'm definitely not working on it currently, in all honesty. But got some deity stuff coming out as well. Nothing product wise, but at least 3, 4 more pieces in the queue that are basically just need to be posted. They're done. They just haven't been released yet. So I've got some personal work I'm looking to release soon. Just have to find the time to do it.
Amazing. Any final thoughts or words from yourself to the listeners before we head off?
Yeah, just there's one thing I've learned with even like with the AI overlords and all the industry pressures, and that sort of like war party we were talking about that's always on the horizon. That's like
Yeah.
it's Mad Max, and they're always behind you. No matter, every time you look, you're like, shit, like they're gonna catch up. Like, gotta keep going. It's like, if there's one thing I've learned, it's to lean into the things you like to do, to just like there's being the artist you think you need to be, and then being the one you want to be, and like just be the one you want to be. Like, I get that industry pressures are hard. Even the thing about AI, right? Like, real quick, if we go back to that, it's like the thing with the AI stuff is it's like a lot of people go, oh, like you don't care about it, you're not worried about it. Like, well, that sounds like a pretty privileged place, and it's like, man, like I'm telling you, I came from nothing, like literally, like a super like no money, and like I might go back to that. Depends on how this all shakes out. I'll always be an artist, and what I've learned over time is like there's being one that you think you need to be and being one that you actually want to be. Like, just be the thing you want to be. It's even trying to like get jobs, you can tell, employers can tell, companies and clients can tell, like when you're phoning it in and you're not really into a thing. It's kind of like when you see an actor and they like didn't really kill the role and they weren't really into it. Similar thing. It's like authenticity speaks to everyone. That includes the people that consume things and the people that hire you to work on the thing that gets consumed. Like, be honest, make art that you really like, that you really enjoy, like being the artist you want to be, and like it will find its audience. Like, it will get you the work that you actually enjoy doing. Like, there's a place for it. You just have to be willing to figure out like what that art is and who the artist is behind it. But like, yeah, do the thing you want to do, not the thing you think you need to do. Believe me, it's a much better path.
Amazing advice, Robbie. This is incredible chatting. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
A huge thanks to Robbie for jumping on and sharing his wisdom. Hit the links to see what he's up to, and then be sure to head to learnsquare.com and take some of our courses just like Robbie has done. Remember, all of our first lessons are free. I've been your host, Aaron Dander. Till next time.